Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Transformation podcasts. So here's the hard truth. Most change programs fail, but not because the strategy is weak. They fail because leaders overlook the invisible power that lies in their organization, the power of networks, of trust and connection. And today's guest, Hilton Barbour, marketer, culture change strategist and organizational connector, believes that just 3% of employees drive 90% of the change in your organization. And we're going to delve into why. Hilton, welcome to the show.
Susie, I've been so looking forward to this conversation. So delighted we're having it.
Yeah, me too. I'm delighted to have you on the show. So, Hilton, to borrow one of your words, we're going to unapologetically discuss culture and explore the role of connection, networks, and emotional intelligence in creating sustainable transformation. So I'm going to quote you to start with. And for those of you listening, I'm doing inverted commas signs. So people, not pixels. That's the quote. Why so? And how does it translate into culture change?
So appreciate that air quotes opening. That's fantastic.
Especially
For,
if
for,
you're not
those,
watching.
for listeners, that's available in t-shirts and coffee mugs in the gift shop as well.
Yeah.
So, Susie, great question. The people, not pixels component came from my career background. So
Mm,
I started in marketing and marketing strategy. And at an epoch about a decade ago, when, if we can all remember, it seems like an eternity, digital transformation was all the rage. You couldn't open LinkedIn without having digital transformation thrown in your face. A little like AI is
I
today.
was going to say. Yeah.
So at that stage, as I was going through a transition from strategy and becoming very interested in organizational culture,
Mm,
set out to do a series of interviews, not dissimilar to what we're doing today.
yeah.
Time and again, and this is over 70 to 80 global interviews, the recurring theme was the issue is not the technology.
It's the
The
people.
issue, it's the people. Time and again, for those people who'd had successful or unsuccessful transformations,
Mm,
came down to the people, to the
mm,
culture.
mm.
And in the desire to come up with a pithy t-shirt line, people not pixels became something that I became incredibly passionate about, and that passion continues today.
Mm. And, you know, what does that say about where organizations are putting their investment, Hilton? Because intellectually understanding you, if I speak to any of the C-suite, they all say to me, yes, you're right. Yes, people over pixels, or they don't quite use that saying, but that's exactly what they're saying. And then the reality of how it's budgeted, what's focused upon, what's prioritized. I think we all know that when we get into crisis situations, the first budgets to go
Yeah.
are people related things, learning, training, innovation. So, you know, what does that mean for what we need to do to help organizations deploy what they're saying around people?
So, firstly, I'll say I have a significant empathy for those in the C-suite, particularly publicly traded companies.
Mm,
Why? Because every 90 days, somebody gets them on a phone call and says, what have you done to accelerate the stock price of the organization that you lead?
yeah.
So the reality is the significant pressure, that velocity,
Mm,
is not surprising for people to invest in technology.
mm,
Obviously, technology is a great unlock.
yeah.
But if we were to look at the current situation with AI and the significant investments there, I think we're back to a movie that maybe you and I have seen before, that the technology becomes an efficiency play.
Mm,
And heaven knows organizations have areas of significant inefficiency. But what's missed, and back to why not the people side,
mm,
the reality is it's faster to implement a piece of technology
of course.
than it is to get 10,000 people to stop doing what they've been doing for a decade and start to do new things and work in new ways. So I think it's not some Machiavellian instinct in executives.
No.
But I think it is a component of the velocity with which they feel they have to lead, and technology is a faster accelerant in their minds to deploy than working on the human side, the people side.
But it's interesting, isn't it, how we can just step over learning from previous deployments of previous tools. You know, if I look at HR suites or ERP systems, or, you know, in my experience, both within an organization and now with clients, they put the tool in because it's great and it's going to optimize things and it's end-to-end value chain and everything else. And then they look at the process and think, oh, I better try and tweak this. And then they try and shoehorn the existing into that. So, you know, why are we learning nothing? Well, you can never learn nothing. That's my view on learning. But why are we not putting into place any lessons learned from what happened with doing that before? Because, you know, if I look at the different parts of change, and you've got technical change and adaptive change, we're looking at an adaptive challenge with a technical solution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Susie, I wish that I had a pithy answer, as pithy as people, not pixels. I genuinely wish I could give you a glib answer for that. The truth is, I don't know. It's a source of both constant fascination and frustration for me. Because again, I think for any of your listeners and the people who follow your great work, we would all instinctively acknowledge that if our people, if our culture isn't enthusiastically committed to whatever change we're putting forward, your strategy will flounder or fail. The adoption will slow or stop. So the balancing act, I would suggest for your viewers, your listeners, is there has to be a way to engage your humans proactively, bring them into the conversation, leverage their skills, their passion, their creativity to help with the adoption. This is not a technology versus humans. This is a technology and humans. So finding that balance is vital. I think taking pause to do that is probably going to be the hardest but most important work most C-suites face in the years ahead.
And I think we're in this shift, though, aren't we, where in lots of organizations, it's still binary in the way it's thought about. So it's either or. So you can either have the budget for this or you can do that. You can either buy the new ERP tool or you can train everyone in managing complexity, for example. And like you say, we need both. So, which brings me to this idea of the invisible part of culture and performance. But before we get there, can I ask you, Hilton, because everybody has their own definition of culture, and we're going to talk about culture. What is your lens on culture? How would you define it?
In simple terms?
Yeah, please.
Well, heaven knows, because Susie, I think part of the challenge for people who, like myself, are passionate advocates for culture is the fact that we've made it soft, amorphous, ambiguous, at times over-intellectualized it. And I think what's ended up happening, the outcome of that, is the classic sense that culture is the soft stuff. It's the fuzzy, squishy stuff related to our humans, where the reality is it's the hard part. It's the hardest thing that executives have to do, which is to motivate, entice, energize a group of other humans towards getting something done. If I may, my simple definition would be how our humans behave and make decisions inside an organization. Why is that vital? Because it's the behavior that is how we interact with each other and interact with those across our ecosystems. And the making decisions is vital, because every day inside your organization, 100 million tiny and incredibly large and important decisions are made. And if those decisions are not made in line with the strategy, then we've got a problem. Or worse, if those decisions are not made at all,
Yeah.
we find ourselves in a world of hurt.
Mm.
So that would be the definition. We act, behave, and make decisions inside an organization. But I'm also a fan of a more pithy example, which is your culture is defined by the worst behavior tolerated by management. And I'm happy to get into that conversation uh, today as well.
Well, and we will, because I think it's pivotal to whether your transformation is going to be sustainable or not. And it's the harder conversation that needs to be had, but that often isn't. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, the decision-making inertia that you've just described gets stuck in the messy middle with the soft stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't soft at all, as we both know. But it brings me to the invisible side of what makes soft stuff hard.
Mm-hmm.
So the importance of relational and emotional infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
in building culture and performance. And it is critical for me to move from this power over paradigm to a power with,
Mm-hmm.
which brings me to your idea of informal power networks and the 3% discussion, which we'll come to later. But what pulled you toward this idea of a connected organization? Because and not connected technically, not enabled by digital. I mean, humanly connected
Mm-hmm.
across organizational silos.
I think it's just the fact that I exist as a human being in the world.
Mm,
I mean, I'd love to say it was some deep anthropological exercise that I went through, and
mm,
a moment's pause for Jane Goodall, who passed away
yes.
this week. But the reality is, as humans in the world, we have 100,000 interactions with other humans informally every day. We
Mm,
have relationships, be it with the barista at your Starbucks in the morning, be it with your team and inside
mm,
your organization, be it within the microcosm of your family,
mm,
immediate or extended.
mm,
These are all relationships where decisions are made about how to move something forward, whether
mm.
it's booking a family holiday or just ordering your latte. We have a million of these
Mm,
interactions.
mm,
And to think that inside an organization, that human connection, that human influence
mm,
would somehow mysteriously end as our employees badge in and badge out is sheer lunacy, to be perfectly
mm,
honest.
mm,
So for me, the reality of relationships, as you talked about, is a pivotal component, because from relationships are all the things, again, we talk about all the time:
mm,
trust, advocacy, commitment, energy.
mm.
All of those come out of the relationships we have, or falter if those relationships are in some ways taken advantage of or very poor.
Yeah. And I think, for me, relationships are the currency of systems, whatever that system looks like. And even when you get systems of systems, that's what keeps it afloat. And I'm going to come back to your word influence,
Mm-hmm.
and the informal networking structures of an organization. And when in one of my last jobs in the organization I worked in, we set up the Leadership University to serve all the leaders in that organization across all sites. But the discussion was leadership equals impact, which means that it's not just people who've been put in an org chart
Mm-hmm.
in a box that says, I'm a leader and I'm head of and I have a team. But you
Mm-hmm.
also have experts and other people in the organization, key influencers, who have incredible influence and sway in the organization. You don't see them on any org chart. You don't see them visibly anywhere unless it's something they care about. And as we know, innovation comes from the edges of systems. So,
Yeah.
and they stay on the edges for a very good reason.
Yeah.
Because they want to try and do things differently, and they have huge amounts of influence and build communities that bring a whole lot of momentum. So can we
Mm-hmm.
come back to the 3% rule
Sure.
and what it means? Because it's such a tangible and effective way
Yeah.
of not only creating momentum, but also unlocking potential that may lie invisible
Hmm.
and finding leaders that you didn't know you had.
Amen. Susie, amen. So firstly, I have to stop and credit my dear friends at Innoviser, which is an incredible consulting firm based in Copenhagen, Denmark, and their CEO, Jep Hansgaard, who's become an old and dear friend over the course of my culture journey.
Mm.
The 3% rule is something born out of that organization. So again, credit where credit is due. But this was one of those serendipitous intersections on LinkedIn that
Mm.
has led to a friendship and working together on programs and projects.
The
But for
power
the
of
enterprise,
networks, Hilton, the
yes,
power of networks.
100%. It's
Mm.
actually, as you say, a delicious serendipitous manifestation of networks. Um, but the work, when Yep took me through the work,
Mm.
again, at its core, it's inherently human.
Yeah.
And what it identifies in the process in a very unsexy way is called organizational network analysis.
Mm.
But what it does do is define who connects an organization, where are they connected, and as you understand those points of connection and the people that are those points of connection, now as leadership, you have this remarkable opportunity to unlock that potential by
Mm.
activating those people. And here's why. Depending on how you look at those individuals, they can often be a source of sense making.
Mm.
Why does the organization do what it's doing? Can be a source of ideas. Where do you get your ideas from? Will show you likely a different network inside an organization. Who do you trust? Becomes potentially again a different lighting up of a different network inside
Mm.
the organization. Or, and I do adore this one, particularly at this time inside organizations where we talk about burnout and fatigue.
Yeah.
Where do you get your energy?
Mm.
And I would ask again, anybody listening to this podcast, think about your own organization, think about yourself as an individual, and just write down a quick little list. Who do I trust? Who do I get my ideas from? Who do I call after the all staff Zoom call to say, do you believe what we just heard? Do you think that that's what we're doing? Do
Did
you
we
think
make that decision?
did we do that?
Yeah.
And again, I think anybody listening to this, write down that short little list and look at those names,
Mm.
and then imagine that done across your entire organization. And then, and this is the critical activation part, what would you do differently to get those people engaged in your next transformation or change?
Mm.
That's where the opportunity lies.
Mm. And there are some brilliant case studies and examples of that in the ebook you co-authored with Jep Hangard, which I will put the link in the comments, which taught me a lot about exactly how powerful those
Mm-hmm.
informal networks can be, and that leaders often misidentify influences based on their own bias,
Yes.
and favoring extroverts and titles instead
Mm-hmm.
of what's going on in the organization. So for me, informal networks flow outside of org charts,
Mm-hmm.
which I think dangerously misrepresent how ideas and information actually move across organizations, and energy.
Yes.
And the energy one
100%.
is huge.
Well, Susie, you know, as I sort of try to dimensionalize it myself,
Mm.
I think the idea of org charts to informal influencer networks is a bit akin to pure economics and behavioral economics. One suggests pure rationality. Pure economics is about a completely informed
Mm.
consumer making rational decisions. Now, after 20 years in marketing, I would suggest I'd dearly love to meet that individual because I've never seen one ever.
Yeah.
By the same token, an org chart,
Mm,
whilst an important exercise to highlight where functions
of course.
intersect and
Yeah.
hierarchies and all that good stuff, there is absolutely a vital need to do that work.
Mm,
But if we think that information, ideas, and sense making follows some well-defined series of boxes with names on it and color-coded, again, I think we're forgetting that there are humans involved. And if
mm,
anything, humans are irrational, we are emotional, we don't always make the best clear-minded decisions.
yeah.
So the org chart is a great artifact,
Mm,
but if you don't have something attached to it that is
mm,
your informal network,
yeah.
then again, you're missing a golden opportunity.
And I think, we are perfectly imperfect, aren't we? That's what humans is about, and leaders are no exception at any level of the organization. And I want to come back to what you were saying around management, what they do and don't do.
Mhm.
Because as we transition into this newer organizational design and way of working, some of us are intentionally doing that. Some of us are being pulled there, screaming and
Mhm.
kicking. Let's put it that way. Because it's sort of going against everything that they know how to do, that protects their identity and they want to do.
Yes.
So if I look at the whole discussion around accountability and
Mhm.
decision making, and for me, flatter organizations, and by flatter I mean less hierarchical, so more networked, bring with them a huge opportunity to use the personal agency that you've always had in the system, but because of the way it was run and the culture around that, you could have convinced yourself that you didn't have any. Now that depends on character, clearly. I was never
Yes.
convinced of that. But so people have all this agency and they don't know what to do with it. And because accountability isn't clear, it
Mhm.
gets diluted. So how do you see us in the work we do and leaders and organizations being able to leverage that? What does it take to really lead a more informal structure?
What a brilliant question, Susie. What a brilliant question. I think it's a component of several things. I think, firstly, acknowledging all of those inherently human
Mm,
characteristics of leadership. I genuinely believe that no human, regardless of where they sit in an organization, wakes up in the morning and says, I want to totally sabotage the company I work for.
mm,
So again, let's be clear. I come from the believe in pure and good intent to begin with.
yes.
Even from some of the most toxic and terrible managers I've had over my career,
Mm,
a moment to empathize and go, I don't think they're deliberately acting like that,
yeah.
but there is an undercurrent of some rationale within the culture. So if I go back to, again, your question, I think one, transparency, and again, a very beleaguered word on LinkedIn, authenticity,
Can you
is a,
define that for me, Hilton? I'm only joking.
I've got 22,985 LinkedIn posts this morning that will give you examples and case studies of authenticity. But I do think
Mm,
one of the biggest things that we do to harm our humans is out of one corner of our mouths we talk about accountability,
yeah.
and then don't make it abundantly clear, direct, and unambiguous what we mean by that. What am I accountable for? Do I have the decision rights? Do I have the latitude? What happens if I try something and it fails?
Mm,
Again, all of these elements of transformation and change, you and I have lived through numerous times.
mm,
So you can't tell somebody that they're accountable for something and then be ambiguous about exactly what that means, nor give them the latitude to actually lean into it.
mm,
The second thing around agency, again, I think your point is very well made. Most people starting in a job probably do feel that.
mm.
Day one at
Yes.
an organization,
Woo!
oh my God, I can't wait to bring my creativity, my energy, my commitment, my passion to this organization.
Mm,
And if we're really lucky, elements of that still exist 6 months later. But
Mm,
if we're really unfortunate, the system beats it out of those individuals by saying, no, we need you to conform to what already exists. No, we don't need you to question why we do things that we do in the way that we do it. Again, what an incredible missed opportunity for most organizations to get that
mm,
that naivety that comes from, wow, that seems really weird. Why do we do that? Do
mm,
we really need to fill out 6 forms to get a pencil here? That seems a bit weird.
mm,
Again, we've got all these wonderful human characteristics of curiosity and
mm,
agency. And then we bring people into this place and say, no, well, heaven forbid, we shouldn't let them off the leash.
mm.
Again, missed opportunity.
And what I hear the most is, yeah, I know, but I can't do that. The system won't let me do that. Or you can't do that here. That's not how we work. And all this sort of passive
Mhm.
discussion around, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, which of course, if I take it a step further, makes consequential management very difficult. Because if I look at the fact that accountability is quite fuzzy,
Yeah.
and there's a way of doing things that people are familiar with, and that the system perpetuates that,
Hmm.
then it's hard, particularly for people who don't have a certain level in the organization, and even if they do,
Hmm.
to actually call out the BS on what's going on and say, okay, I think we could do this differently. And even if they did, would it be heard?
Yeah.
So I think, how do we move the system?
Hmm.
How do we use our agency to move the system? And the fact that we're already in networks or communities within that system, I think is a brilliant place to start.
Absolutely. Again, we've inherently got these points of connectivity. We've inherently got these humans that become either early warning radar.
Mm,
What's happening in the system? What is the relative energy in the system? What is flowing between these people that have an outsized
mm,
influence on the colleagues around them?
mm,
Again, Susie, I think you make an elegant point I should have pointed out earlier. When you talk about informal influences inside an organization, let's not mistake that there are some panacea of people skipping around potentially with pom-poms and cheerleading how wonderful the organization is.
yeah.
Often the 3%, or at times the 3%, can be the people with the biggest naysaying or the
Mm,
biggest
yes.
skepticism
Yeah.
about what the organization is doing. But inherently in that posture too is this wonderful opportunity to say, what is it that we're not doing that
Mm,
would bring you on board?
mm,
What is it that's created in you an opinion that this isn't possible? What would
mm,
be required to change that opinion? Is
mm,
it more information? Are we too secretive about this plan? Have we not connected the dots enough for
mm,
you? Have we not allowed you to do the things that would give you that
mm,
optimism, that hope, that energy, that velocity? Again, we have this wonderful untapped, I'm going to say sounding board, for want
mm,
of a better phrase, to
mm,
say what would be required to get your commitment, and more importantly, the magnification of your commitment through
mm,
the people who look to you for
mm.
influence.
If Hilton, if I actually want it. So I think this is I think this is indicative of the disconnect between the sense making and what's said at the top and what the leadership are actually modeling
Mhm.
and what's flowing down through the organization. I mean, I'll never forget somebody saying to one of my colleagues in a sort of innovation satellite structure, right, when you finish playing with innovation stuff and ideas, can you come and do some real work? And I was like, oh, and he was in the committee that was sponsoring this
Mhm.
initiative. And I thought, okay, that's a huge disconnect.
Yeah.
And two, you can't ask for innovation and squash it when it gets to the top. Because
Yep.
whenever you ask for innovation, you know that there are going to be tough questions to ask,
Mhm.
tough, of the organization, but tough of you as a leader because it may change your identity, your status, the governance,
Yeah.
things that we don't want to look at. And that's where I ask myself,
Mm-hmm.
how can we create networks and communities
Mm-hmm.
that can have an impact
Mm-hmm.
and an influence on that type of behavior? Now,
Mm-hmm.
that sounds really judgmental, and I understand what's driving that behavior, but it doesn't mean that it's okay.
100%. Uh, Susie, if I may, what a that's an elegant segue into other work and other wonderful humans that I've met on my journey. And I
Mm,
call out Jeremy Dean of Elephants and Riders in New Zealand and
mm,
Sandra Worthy of Change Enthusiasts in Atlanta. And what's at the core of the work that they do, and I think goes to the situation that you talk about, is again the reality that our humans are emotional beings. And again, emotions,
mm.
which we all know drive how we make decisions,
Yeah,
seems to be something that we don't want to talk about inside our organizations. Again, because it's messy, it's uncomfortable,
it's
it gets
vulnerable.
it's vulnerability. Again, insert Brene Brown here.
Yeah.
Um, but again, that sort of disconnect of our organization is this rational environment where emotions don't play a role in how we think, how we work as teams,
Mm,
how we work as a function, how we work across geographies. Again, while I recognize that it's hard,
mm,
if you take a moment's pause and say, how many meetings today would have been different
mm,
if we understood the emotions lying beneath the participants? And how different would that be if we at least took a moment to say, you're obviously very excited. What's going on? My child is graduating from university.
mm,
Fantastic. What about you? I'm a little distracted because I had a terrible commute into the office today. Those small acknowledgements of the emotions behind our humans again become a huge unlock
mm, mm,
for leaders at any level to say, if I could understand these emotions, if I could surface these emotions,
mm,
recognizing that there will be good and bad,
mm.
and this is just the human condition.
Yeah.
But if I create an environment where talking about our emotions and finding cultural rituals to mitigate and manage those,
Mm.
what kind of different sets of decisions would our humans make?
I mean, that's a whole different podcast. I mean, it's such a vast, but I completely agree with you. And I love the work that Jeremy does in with his emotional culture deck. And he's been, and we've discussed it at some length on this podcast. But
Yes.
I think that it still remains, it's so powerful when you get leaders in a room and you do it with them and you give them the vocabulary, emotional literacy, to actually
Yeah.
start thinking about emotional regulation and looking at that layer of their teams and stuff. But it remains in that room.
Yes.
And I think it's a shame that we haven't had enough courageous conversations with the top of the organization to be able to scale
Mm-hmm.
what is essentially competitive advantage in the future if I look at teams of teams and how
Yeah.
ecosystems work. And I wonder what else we can do as networks in an organization
Mm-hmm.
to provide momentum for that to happen and for it not to get squashed at the top, which, I mean, this is a whole other podcast and we could stay on for
Yeah.
hours and I would love to, but time is running and I'm going to be respectful of time. But which brings me to your vision,
Yeah.
Hilton, for the future of culture and leadership in the workplace. How can we unlock all this hidden potential? It never ceases to amaze me
Yeah.
how much potential is lying untapped in
Mm-hmm.
organizations because of definitions of talent, because of definitions of selection processes,
Mm-hmm.
because of norms within an organization. We don't see it, or we don't want to see it, or we don't believe it's true. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when I was in an organization and we were looking for data analytics, we just went out and looked at every single competence in the organization. We got so many brilliant surprises of internal people. It wasn't anything to do with the job they did there, but they
Yeah.
coded websites at the weekend. But wow, I mean, it was such untapped potential that we could crowdsource to do
Hmm.
something different with. So I feel quite strongly, as you can hear, about
Yeah.
what we could do with this potential if we actually step back from ourselves and from the busyness of day-to-day work and sat with the C-suite.
Well, truth be told, Susie, and I think you probably had more lived experience with this than I have, but I think being able to unlock it at the edges,
Yeah.
whether we call it pilot programs or we find unique scenarios and situations where it is where the sheer pressure
Mm.
of unlocking it as some magic 10 commandments. Insert Charlton Heston descending from the latest C-suite offsite with 10 commandments that include we're now going to engage you to discuss your emotions across 50,000 employees globally. I think
I'm getting
is
a vision.
yeah. And for those listening to the podcast, we'll insert suitable angelic music at this point too. Um, I think the pressure to succeed on such a powerful and courageous mandate, I think it respectfully would be beyond the latitude that most C-suite executives would be given. Why? Because again, they are very public. They are under the scrutiny of a board of directors. They're under the scrutiny of Wall Street, investors and shareholders and things like this. But I'd suggest it's not like it hasn't happened before.
Mm.
I think the example that in recent years that comes to me is Paul Paulson at
Yes.
Unity
Yeah.
said emphatically, we're no longer going to do 90-day analyst calls because we don't want the tail wagging the dog.
Mm.
So I think it can happen. But for most organizations, the opportunity does lie at the edges to build and nurture this new muscle, this
Mm.
new kind of cultural sensitivity, and then magnify and amplify that using informal influences to take that energy,
Mm.
then transmit that through the organization because it is, again, back to systems.
Mm.
It is the ripple effect
Yeah.
that actually gains the momentum, gains the buy-in,
Mm.
and ultimately probably gains the confidence and courage of the C-suite.
Yeah. And the ripple effect, which I love because it's exactly that, is exciting, but it's also very exhausting.
Hmm.
And it's unpredictable and it can go all over the organization or just into a small team and sort of stop there. So the start small thing of, how do I map my connectors? Who do I trust? Who do I go to when I'm lost? Who mimics my behavior? And I'm a big believer in the fact that people who are like-minded resonate on the same frequency.
Yes.
And I think we find each other in the organizations or communities or, places that we're working.
Hmm.
So, I think my vision for the future is that that becomes explicit.
Yes.
And I know that we share that quest to make it explicit, Hilton. So, if you had one call to action to leave with our listeners who
Hmm.
are all leading boldly, whether it be in organizations, their own business, or their own teams,
Hmm.
what would your call to action be?
Be two components. One, don't be scared of the fact that emotions run through your organization. Just take a moment's pause and acknowledge that it's happening whether you like it or not. But if you're not prepared to acknowledge that and dimensionalize that in some ways, again, you're missing a foundational piece of how the people in your building show up. So that's part one.
Mm.
Part two is if you aren't aware of where your organization is connected, or more worryingly, disconnected,
Yeah.
but you think that your org chart has magically built connections that don't exist, then again, you're working with some foundational elements that are a bit rickety. And with the speed and velocity with which business is moving today, shouldn't that be a concern that you'd want to address immediately?
Thank you. I'm going to leave our listeners with those 2 calls to action and to actually do it immediately, but deliberately. Hilton, thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts and for your ebook, the link to which I will put in the show notes. Where can people find out more about you, what you do, your services?
You can find me on LinkedIn screaming into that community, screaming into those networks about the conversation that we've just had. But Susie, before we leave, I want to thank you. This conversation is a manifestation of that network resonance you talked about, that people
Totally.
with the same passion, the same conviction, and dare I say it, the same humanity find each other and have, I think, important and crucial conversations like this. So thank you for the work that you do and for being the flag bearer that you are.
And I think the more of us, the merrier. And you're right, it is about more than human-centered organizations. It's about humanity. So Hilton, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Take good care.